we've got to assume that hopefully in the future we as in Ukraine have access to the deep sea ports, because if not, and Ukraine becomes landlocked, it is then a totally different scenario, not only for Ukraine but for the world.
It was in the sense of crisis, if you like, of trying to get, well, presumably grain out of the fields and then into storage, and then out of storage and out of Ukraine.
Okay, well, the good news first. The good news is that we are growing the crops. So I think that at present, albeit that our yields may be about 10% lower than normal, will most likely harvest in excess of 20 million tonnes of grain in the next few weeks, and a significant rapeseed crop. And so far, the season is average for the summer crops. So that on the plus side, they're all growing, and we have had minimal interference with the growing programs in the west of Ukraine and the north part of Ukraine. On the good news, we are exporting more via rail and by road. This month we will probably export in excess of 2 million tonnes. This, however, is where the good news stops. The bad news is that logistics is still a critical problem. And if you remember that we still have to export under normal conditions when all deep sea ports are open, in excess of 80 million tonnes of grain, and at best at present we're up to maybe possible 25 million tonnes of exports annually, and that still gives us by the end of the summer season almost 2 years, maybe 2.5 years of stock on hand. And therein lies the problem for all of us growing crops and agricultural produce in Ukraine. What do we do next? Because once the storages are full, then do we plant and how much we plant for the following 2023 season? Therein lies our biggest problem.
And is there just no prospect of getting that grain which is in storage out of Ukraine?
Matt, I have tried many times to see light in the tunnel. And frankly, I just can't see it for the first time in my life. Until we have deep ports that are open, which is Mykolaiv and Odessa, we cannot export this grain. It is physically impossible with the infrastructure going into the EU at present to do what was done by large deep sea ports with very, very large ships. Impossible.
There's just no. Presumably, you've sat and thought of as many weird and wonderful ways of possibly trying to get it out, and just nothing works.
Well, look, what the industry is doing, they've been buying containers, they've been filling up containers, they've been using containers as a method of transport. They get the grains to the border, they put them into temporary storages on the EU side. All of this has been action with enormous amount of support by the EU and the UK. So everybody is doing as much as they can, but you can't rebuild railroads and rail gauges easily over a short period of time. That's a long-term solution. But we've got to assume that hopefully in the future we as in Ukraine have access to the deep sea ports, because if not, and Ukraine becomes landlocked, it is then a totally different scenario, not only for Ukraine but for the world.
And just on the question of when to make the decision about how much to plant, because you don't want to have 2 years worth stuck in storage, when will you have to make that decision?
We have to make final decision at the last week of September, the first week of October. Normally we would plant in the 3rd to 4th week of October. So that's a big decision time for the whole industry of Ukraine.